that is our interest, if that is our sincere interest, then we have to put an end to evading free and open discussion of this conflict. I should not be afraid to talk about human rights violations in Israel. And I should not be afraid about being charged with anti-Semitism if I do so. Our refusal to discuss it has kept work between us very limited and narrow in participation. I don't think it's going to grow beyond what we have today. That's just my personal opinion. And I'm not a pessimist. I'm actually, to be a nonprofit manager, you have to be an optimist because you're always confronting challenges. To expand Jewish-Muslim relations, to do more work together, and to have more people participating, we need to be open to the conversation and the conflict, and I suggest the following guidelines. One, I have 5. 1, we have to listen and to acknowledge each other's narrative with an open mind and heart and with respect. This part might be difficult, but as part of this effort, consider the counter-narrative within each of our communities. For instance, that of Jewish Voice for Peace in the Jewish community and in the Muslim community at Muslim Leadership Institute, which people have condemned within my community. This will help us to understand the narrative of the other, because these are people from within our own communities that have a counter-narrative. So I think that we should try to listen to them. I already do. To the MLI folks, I know a lot of them that have participated in the Hartman Institute, MLI, Muslim Leadership Institute effort, and they're great people. 2, we have to confront bigotry in our own ranks. We Muslims need to acknowledge and denounce the anti-Semitism in the Muslim community. That bigotry is very much present among us, even here in California. In a recent article I wrote for the Huffington Post, I started by expressing the horror I felt at 2 imams right here in California who uttered thoroughly insulting denunciation of Jews as a people. While I'm convinced that most Muslims worldwide would share my horror at this, the mere fact that imams would make such statements points to an undercurrent of anti-Semitism in our community that we need to confront. And of course, the same goes for Jews and Islamophobia. In addition to confronting open and deliberate bigotry, we need to be ready to call out expressions of unconscious or unthinking bigotry, Islamophobia or anti-Semitism. If you hear something that sounds anti-Semitic or Islamophobic, say so. Seek to educate. Be ready to explain how the statement is bigoted and how your conversation partners can express their legitimate concerns without giving voice to the prejudicial attitudes that are so much part of our social life today. 3, be prepared to for sharply critical questions. Do your best to respond to them without being defensive and to hear the legitimate concerns they seek to voice. For example, Muslims will ask Jews, why aren't you condemning the violations of Palestinian human rights when you do so much good work elsewhere in the country and around the world? Why don't we hear Jews condemning what's happening? Jews will ask Muslims, where were you when Israeli civilians were being hit by terrorism? Why is it that it's only after 9/11 that we hear you denounce terrorism? 4, be ready to acknowledge the truth of your partner's narrative and the omissions and inadequacies of your own. 5, recognize that there's already some common ground. Polls of Muslims in the US and worldwide have shown that the majority believe that it's possible to make peace with the State of Israel. And majority of Jews likewise are ready to accept the Palestinian state. In short, there is a majority support in both communities for a 2-state solution, and that gives me and a lot of people hope. In closing, I think if we engage in conversation on this basis, not only will we grow Muslim-Jewish relations in the US and keep them authentic, and that's really what my interest is, to keep them authentic and real and truthful. Perhaps one day, ordinary Americans, Muslims, Jews, and Christians can help resolve the conflict by sending delegations to forge a peaceful agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. This vision is not as far-fetched as you might think. What's sad, what's cynical, what's disturbing is the inability of people to consider the role in peacemaking, or the possibility of peace between these two groups. Palestinians and Israelis need our help. We have no excuse for not giving it, living as we do in the richest, most abundant nation in the world. And perhaps together, Americans of Muslim, Jewish, and Christian heritage can do the same for other conflicts by living out our shared imperative of peacemaking. Nobody can set limits to this work except for God, and God is on the side of the peacemakers. He tells us so in our books. So let us be the peacemakers by working together. Thank you.